December 15th, 1985, 7:47 p.m. St. Michael's Catholic Church security camera captures 3 boys in choir robes exiting through the vestry door. Tommy Walsh, 12. David Chen, 13. Ryan Martinez, 11. They're laughing about something. Tommy playfully shoving David while Ryan trails behind, clutching his sheet music. This grainy black and white footage would be the last confirmed sighting of the 3 choir boys who'd sung their hearts out just minutes earlier at evening practice. 38 years later, on November 23, 2023, church organist Margaret Foster, now 81, sits in a police interrogation room, her hands trembling as she holds a yellowed piece of paper. "I've carried this secret for 38 years, she whispers, tears streaming down her weathered face. Those boys, they didn't run away, they didn't get lost. They tried to save our church from evil men, and they paid with their lives. What I found hidden in that organ, God forgive me, I should have spoken sooner." The 911 calls started coming in at 8:30 p.m. that December night. First was Maria Martinez, Ryan's mother, her broken English heavy with panic. "My boy, he no come home. He always home by 8. Always. Something wrong, please help." Then Elizabeth Chen, David's mother, a respected pediatrician whose clinical composure cracked. "David left practice at 7:30. It's a 10-minute walk. He's never late. Never. Send someone now." Finally, Patrick Walsh, Tommy's father, a construction foreman who'd driven the route 3 times already. "I'm telling you, something happened to those boys. They walk home together every Sunday. Every single Sunday. They're gone." St. Michael's Catholic Church stood at the heart of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a working-class town where everyone knew everyone, where doors stayed unlocked, where 3 choir boys walking home after practice was as routine as sunrise. The church, built in 1892, was more than a place of worship. It was the community's soul. But behind its stained glass windows and beneath its holy water fonts, a cancer had been growing, and 3 innocent boys had stumbled upon it. Tommy Walsh was 12 years old, the joker of the trio, red hair that refused to be tamed, freckles scattered across his nose like stars, and a smile that could charm extra cookies from even the strictest lunch lady. His voice was pure gold. Father Morrison had said Tommy sang like an angel who'd learned a few earth jokes. But Tommy had a secret that December. He'd developed his first real crush on Jenny Patterson, who sat 3 pews ahead every Sunday. He'd been practicing a special song, planning to dedicate it to her at the Christmas concert. His diary, found under his bed after his disappearance, contained dozens of drafts of what he'd say. "This is for someone special. You know who you are." The words, written in a 12-year-old's careful script, would never be spoken. David Chen, 13, was the group's unofficial leader. Straight A student, violin prodigy, and possessed of a tenor voice that made elderly parishioners weep. His parents had immigrated from Taiwan when he was 3, working 18-hour days in their restaurant to give their only son every opportunity. David had just received early acceptance to St. Augustine's Academy, the prestigious Catholic boarding school that was his ticket to Juilliard. He'd been walking on air for weeks, telling everyone who'd listen about his plans to become a conductor. His acceptance letter, framed on his bedroom wall, would yellow with age, as his parents refused to take it down, hoping he'd walk through the door to claim it. Ryan Martinez, the baby at 11, was small for his age, but had the biggest voice. When he sang, people stopped what they were doing. Construction workers would pause their hammering when practice voices drifted through the church windows. Ryan was also the worrier of the group, the one who reminded the others about homework, who made sure they had their permission slips, who noticed things others missed. It was Ryan who'd first spotted what was happening at St. Michael's Sul. Ryan who'd suggested they do something about it. Ryan, whose sharp eyes would ultimately cost all three boys their lives. The weeks leading up to December 15th had been strange. Margaret Foster, the church organist for 23 years at that point, noticed the boys whispering during practice, passing notes, staying late to practice extra, but spending more time huddled in conversation than singing. She'd asked Tommy once what was wrong. "Nothing, Mrs. Foster," he'd said, but his usual smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just church stuff." The truth was far more dangerous than anyone imagined. On November 24th, 3 weeks before their disappearance, the boys had stayed after practice to help Father Morrison organize sheet music for Advent. The priest had been called away to deliver last rites, asking the boys to continue sorting in his office. That's when David found it, the ledger that had fallen behind the filing cabinet. A ledger that showed St. Michael's was missing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money donated for the children's hospital, the food bank, the homeless shelter. But it was what Ryan found that truly terrified them. Hidden in Father Morrison's desk drawer, beneath his Bible, was a series of photographs, pictures of Father Morrison in compromising situations, clearly being used as blackmail, and with the photos, letters from the church board threatening to destroy him if he didn't comply with their financial schemes. The elderly priest they all loved wasn't stealing. He was being forced to enable the theft by church board members who'd discovered his past indiscretions from before he'd taken his vows. The boys faced an impossible dilemma. Exposing the truth would destroy Father Morrison, a man who'd baptized them, heard their first confessions, been like a grandfather to them. But staying silent meant letting criminals steal from the poor, the sick, the desperate. It was David who suggested a solution: gather evidence of the financial crimes without revealing Father Morrison's past, protect the priest while stopping the thieves. For 3 weeks, they'd been junior detectives. Tommy used his altar boy duties to photograph documents. David, with his musical equipment knowledge, figured out how to use the church's new recording system, a state-of-the-art Tascam 4-track that had been donated for recording sermons. Ryan kept watch and documented everything in a composition notebook, his careful handwriting recording dates, times, and what they'd discovered. December 15th was supposed to be their final evidence gathering. The church board was meeting that evening in the rectory, and the boys had hidden a microphone in the conference room. They planned to record the entire meeting, then take the evidence to Tommy's uncle, who was a state police detective in Harrisburg. After choir practice, while the other children went home, Tommy, David, and Ryan stayed behind, telling Margaret Foster they wanted to practice the Christmas trio one more time. Margaret Foster's 2023 testimony provides the crucial timeline. Practice ended at 7:15. Most children left immediately. Tommy, David, and Ryan asked to stay. "I was tired, my arthritis was acting up, so I said yes but told them to lock up when they finished. I left at 7:20. They were standing by the organ, looking nervous but determined. Tommy hugged me goodbye. He never did that. It was like he knew something was about to happen." At 7:30, according to the security footage, the boys moved from the sanctuary to the choir room, which had a hidden passage to the rectory, a remnant from the church's Underground Railroad days that few people knew existed. They were going to retrieve their recording equipment and the evidence they'd gathered. They were never seen alive again. What happened in those next 17 minutes has been pieced together from evidence found 38 years later. The boys successfully retrieved the recording from the board meeting. On it, clear as day, were voices discussing embezzlement, money laundering, and threats against anyone who might expose them. Board President William Carver can be heard saying, "Morrison's under control. The photos ensure that, and if anyone else gets curious, well, we've handled problems before." But the boys were discovered. A partial recording, found hidden in the organ where Margaret Foster discovered it in 2023, captures the confrontation. Heavy footsteps. Adult voices shouting. Tommy's voice saying, "Run." David calling out something urgent in Mandarin that his parents later translated as "help us." And Ryan, brave little Ryan, shouting, "We know everything. We told people. You can't." The recording cuts off mid-sentence. The boys were never seen again after that moment. The cover-up was swift and professional. By 8 p.m., before the parents even called 911, the church board had convened an emergency meeting. William Carver, board president and owner of the largest construction company in town, took charge. The story was set. The boys had been acting strangely lately, probably ran away. Kids being kids. The security footage was supposedly corrupted. The recording equipment was reported stolen. Father Morrison, when questioned by police, appeared distraught but confused. He confirmed the boys had stayed after practice, but said he'd been in his quarters, had seen nothing. What investigators didn't know was that Father Morrison was being controlled. If he didn't cooperate, they'd destroy him and claim he was involved with the boys' disappearance. The priest was trapped between his own shame and his horror at what had happened. The initial police investigation was a masterclass in obstruction. Detective Carl Holmes, who led the case, would later be revealed as William Carver's brother-in-law. Evidence was mishandled. Witnesses were discouraged from coming forward. The FBI was told it was a simple runaway case, not worth federal resources. The narrative was pushed that the boys, facing pressure from school and strict parents, had run away together. But the parents knew better. Maria Martinez noticed Ryan's confirmation medal was missing from his room. He only wore it for protection when he was scared. Elizabeth Chen found David's violin hidden under his bed. He'd told her he was taking it to practice for a special performance. Patrick Walsh discovered Tommy's savings jar empty, $47. He'd been saving for Jenny Patterson's Christmas present, taken as if he knew he'd need money for something important. The families began their own investigation. They discovered that 3 other children from surrounding parishes had disappeared over the previous 5 years. All had been choir members. All had been described as runaways. Despite no history of problems, all had disappeared shortly after church board meetings. A pattern was emerging, but no one in authority would listen. Margaret Foster carried the heaviest burden. On December 14th, the night before the boys disappeared, Ryan had approached her. He'd given her an envelope and said, "Mrs. Foster, if something happens to us, please give this to my mom. Hide it somewhere safe." "Promise?" She'd laughed, ruffled his hair, told him nothing would happen, but his serious expression made her promise. She'd hidden the envelope inside the organ, behind pipes that were never used, thinking she'd return it to him after the Christmas concert. For 38 years, she lived with that envelope hidden in the organ, too afraid to come forward after the boys disappeared, threatened subtly by board members who'd remind her that her pension, her health care, her very survival depended on the church. She'd tried twice to retrieve it, once in 1995 and again in 2005, but both times, board members had appeared as if they knew what she was doing. The message was clear: stay quiet or join the boys. But in 2023, Margaret Foster was dying. Pancreatic cancer. 3 months to live. She had nothing left to lose, and a soul to save. On November 23rd, she returned to St. Michael's with her nephew, a Marine veteran, who'd insisted on accompanying her. She retrieved the envelope from the organ, along with something else the boys had hidden, a cassette tape wrapped in plastic. The envelope contained Ryan's meticulous notes, every crime documented, every conversation overheard, every dollar tracked. The 11-year-old had created a paper trail that would make FBI accountants proud. Names, dates, amounts, destinations. The church board hadn't just stolen from St. Michael's, they'd created a network of embezzlement across 7 parishes, possibly funding organized crime operations in Philadelphia. But it was the cassette tape that broke the case wide open. The boys had recorded themselves on December 14th, knowing they were in danger. David's voice, trying to be brave. If you're listening to this, it means something happened to us. Donovan and 3 other board members have stolen $2.3 million from church donations since 1981. Tommy's voice, cracking with fear but determined. They're using Father Morrison's past to control him. He's not bad. He's just scared. Don't blame him. He tried to protect us when he found out what we knew. And Ryan, always practical. We hid copies of everything. Check the old confessional in the basement, behind the loose panel. Check the bell tower. Inside the broken bell, check the nativity storage room. Inside the largest wise man. We made sure you'd find the truth, even if you don't find us. The FBI raid on November 24, 2023, found everything exactly where Ryan had said it would be. 38 years of dust. Couldn't hide the evidence the 3 boys had compiled. Financial records, photographs, correspondence, and most damning, a second tape the boys had made of the December 15th board meeting. Every word of conspiracy captured in their young voices' introduction. December 15th, 1985, 6:45 p.m. This is Tommy Walsh, David Chen, and Ryan Martinez, recording evidence of crimes at St. Michael's Catholic Church. The tape revealed William Carver discussing previous problems that had been handled, references to the Donetti boy in 81 inches, and those 2 from St. Catherine say, all children who'd disappeared, all officially runaways, a pattern of murder disguised as missing children cases, all to protect a criminal enterprise that had infected the church. The search for the boys' bodies began immediately. Using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs, investigators focused on Carver's construction sites from 1985. On December 1, 2023, they found them beneath what was now a shopping center parking lot, in what had been the foundation of a building under construction in December 1985. 3 small skeletons were discovered. They were still wearing their choir robes. The forensic examination revealed the truth. The boys had been killed on December 15, 1985, between 7:47 p.m. and 8 p.m. The cause of death was blunt force trauma. They'd been murdered in the church, then transported to the construction site, and buried in concrete that was poured the next morning. Carver had signed off on the pour himself, claiming an emergency schedule change due to incoming weather. With the boys were their final possessions. Tommy still had Jenny Patterson's picture in his pocket. David had his acceptance letter to St. Augustine Sal's. Ryan had his composition notebook, wrapped in plastic, containing his final entry, December 15, 1985. Tonight we stop the bad men. I'm scared, but Tommy says, we're doing God's work. David says we're heroes. I just want to go home and hug Mom. If you find this, tell her I love her. Tell her I was brave. The arrests on December 3, 2023, shocked the community. William Carver, 89, in a nursing home but mentally competent, charged with 3 counts of murder. Thomas Donovan, 86, charged with conspiracy and murder. 3 other board members, all in their 80s, charged with various crimes. The network extended to 17 individuals, some dead, some still living, all part of a conspiracy that had stolen millions and killed children to keep it secret. Father Morrison had died in 2001, but his private journals discovered in the rectory revealed his torment, entry after entry of guilt, of self-hatred, of desperate prayers for the boys, his final entry before his death. I see them every night, 3 choir boys singing at the gates of heaven, denied entry because of my cowardice. I could have saved them. I chose my reputation over their lives. Hell awaits, and I deserve it. Margaret Foster's testimony became the emotional center of the trials. She told of Ryan's last hug, of David's perfect pitch, of Tommy's infectious laugh. She told of 38 years of nightmares, of guilt that ate her alive, of a God she could no longer face. I was supposed to protect them, she wept. Every adult in that church was supposed to protect them. We all failed. The family's reactions were a mixture of grief and relief. Maria Martinez, now 74, clutched Ryan's recovered notebook. My baby was brave. He stood up to evil men. I'm proud of him. So proud, but I'd trade all the justice in the world to have him back for just one day. Elizabeth and James Chen, both in their 80s, stood at David's memorial holding his violin. Our son dreamed of making beautiful music. Instead, he died trying to make the world more honest. We immigrated to America believing in justice. It took 38 years, but justice came. Patrick Walsh, 82. Confined to a wheelchair but sharp as ever, Tommy would have been 50 this year. Maybe had kids of his own. Those bastards stole his entire life. His first kiss, his first job, his wedding, his children, grandchildren, all stolen for money. Money that meant nothing to God. Jenny Patterson, now Jennifer Williams, 50, married with 3 children, came forward with her own testimony. Tommy Walsh was going to sing to me at the Christmas concert. I know because David told my friend Sarah, who told me years later. I've thought about that unsung song my entire life. At my wedding, I had the choir sing "O Holy Night" because it was Tommy's favorite. I never forgot the boy who was going to sing for me. The investigation revealed the scope of the criminality, the stolen funds. Over $3 million in 1985 dollars had been laundered through construction projects, real estate deals, and offshore accounts. The money built shopping centers, funded political campaigns, and created a network of corruption that reached into state government. Children had died to protect what amounted to a Catholic mafia, using faith as cover for crime. Other victims' families came forward. The Donetti family, whose son Michael had disappeared in 1981, finally learned he'd discovered discrepancies in church finances while helping with bookkeeping. The 2 boys from St. Catherine's, Paul and Marcus Johnson, had been brothers who'd overheard a confession about the financial crimes. All had been silenced. All had been buried in concrete at Carver construction sites. The Catholic diocese faced a reckoning. How had this been allowed to happen? How had criminals taken over church boards? Where was the oversight? The scandal reached to the Vatican, with Pope Francis himself issuing a statement about the heinous crimes hidden beneath sacred robes, and implementing new financial oversight measures worldwide. The trials began in March 2024. William Carver, despite his age, was declared fit to stand trial. The prosecution presented the boys' evidence, collected by children but preserved for nearly 4 decades. Ryan's meticulous notes became Exhibit A. The photographs Tommy had taken, developed, and hidden were Exhibit C. The defense tried to claim the elderly defendants couldn't be held responsible for crimes from so long ago, but prosecutor Sarah Mitchell destroyed that argument. These men lived free for 38 years while 3 boys lay in concrete graves. Every Christmas, they walked past the church where those children once sang. Every Easter, they took communion with hands stained by innocent blood. Age doesn't wash away murder. The most powerful testimony came from unexpected sources. Former church employees came forward, admitting they'd suspected something, but were too afraid to speak. A janitor revealed he'd seen blood in the rectory that December night, but had been threatened into silence. A secretary admitted she'd altered financial records under threat of deportation. Even former board members who joined after 1985 testified about the culture of fear and control. Dr. Michael Foster, no relation to Margaret, revealed, "When I joined the board in 1995, I was told certain things were legacy issues not to be discussed. When I pressed about missing funds, I received a dead cat on my doorstep with a note. Curiosity kills. I resigned immediately and moved my family out of state." The smoking gun came from Carver's own records, despite his attempts to destroy evidence. Investigators found a safe deposit box with insurance Metis documents Carver had kept to blackmail his co-conspirators if needed. Among them was a handwritten confession from December 16, 1985. The boys had to be silenced. They knew too much. Morrison helped dispose of evidence in exchange for our silence about his past. God forgive us all. On June 15, 2024, exactly 38 years and 6 months after the boys' deaths, the verdict came down. William Carver, guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder, sentenced to life without parole. He would die in prison 3 months later, unrepentant to the end. Thomas Donovan, guilty of conspiracy and murder, sentenced to life. The others received sentences ranging from 20 years to life, most likely to die behind bars given their ages. But the legal verdicts couldn't heal all wounds. St. Michael's Church, tainted by the scandal, saw attendance plummet. The building where 3 boys had sung their last songs became a monument to institutional failure. In 2024, it was deconsecrated and converted into a memorial center for missing children, with a special chapel dedicated to Tommy, David, and Ryan. Margaret Foster lived just long enough to see justice served. She died on July 2, 2024, surrounded by the victims' families who'd forgiven her. Her final words: "I hear them singing, beautiful voices. They're not angry anymore." She was buried with a photo of the 3 boys in their choir robes, their faces forever young, forever innocent. The boys' graves became a pilgrimage site for those fighting institutional corruption. Their story inspired the Choir Boys Act, federal legislation requiring independent oversight of religious financial institutions. Their sacrifice led to the discovery and prosecution of similar schemes in 12 other states. The recording equipment that captured their final investigation is now in the Smithsonian, part of an exhibit on child heroes who fought injustice. The Tascam 4-track that recorded evidence of million-dollar crimes sits beside Ryan's composition notebook, Tommy's camera, and David's sheet music, tools of children who became accidental warriors against evil. The Christmas concert of 2024 at the Memorial Center featured 3 empty chairs on stage, each with a spotlight and a microphone. The surviving members of the 1985 choir, now in their 50s, sang the trio the boys had been practicing Mind's Carol of the Bells. There wasn't a dry eye in the packed audience as their aged voices carried the parts their friends never got to sing. Sarah Mitchell, the prosecutor, reflected on the case. 3 children did what dozens of adults couldn't or wouldn't do. They stood up to power, documented crimes, and paid the ultimate price. Every time I hear a children's choir, I think of them. Every time I see corruption, I remember their courage. They were just kids who loved to sing, but they became heroes. The FBI created a cold case unit specifically for missing choir children, discovering a nationwide pattern of disappearances connected to financial crimes. To date, they've solved 17 cases, all inspired by the methodology three boys created in 1985: document everything, hide evidence in multiple locations, trust each other. Dr. Patricia Hayes, who led the forensic investigation, made a startling discovery. In David's pocket was a small recorder, a Walkman he'd modified to record rather than play. Though the batteries had long died, forensic experts managed to extract partial audio. David's voice, barely 13 years old, speaking in his final moments. "If you find this, we did the right thing. Tell Father Morrison we forgive him. Tell our parents we were brave. Tell the world what happened here." The financial investigation revealed the current value of the stolen money exceeded $50 million with interest and investments. The recovered funds were distributed to the original intended recipients: children's hospitals, food banks, homeless shelters. Each check included a note: "From Tommy, David, and Ryan, 38 years late, but not forgotten." The psychological impact on the community was studied by sociologists for years. How had an entire town been controlled by fear for so long? How had good people stayed silent while children disappeared? Dr. James Whitman's study concluded, "The Millbrook case shows how institutional authority can suppress truth. It takes tremendous courage to challenge systems of power. 3 children had that courage when adults didn't." In the church basement, investigators found something that broke even hardened detectives' hearts. Behind the loose panel Ryan had mentioned was a Christmas present from each boy. Tommy had left a handmade card for Jenny Patterson. David had left his violin bow for the church orchestra, with a note saying, "For the next kid with big dreams." Ryan had left his allowance, $5.75, with a note saying, "For the poor box, the real one." The organ, where Margaret Foster had hidden the evidence for 38 years, was restored and moved to the Memorial Center. Every Sunday at 7:47 p.m. the exact time the boys were last seen alive. It plays Amazing Grace automatically, a reminder that grace can come through the most unlikely vessels, even 3 young boys who just wanted to sing. William Carver's construction empire crumbled after his conviction. The shopping center built over the boys' graves was demolished. In its place, a park was created with 3 statues, boys in choir robes, faces tilted toward heaven, mouths open in eternal song. The inscription reads, "Tommy Walsh, David Chen, Ryan Martinez. They sang truth to power. Their voices echo still." The families created the 3 Voices Foundation, providing music education to underprivileged children and protection for young whistleblowers. To date, they've helped over 1,000 children find their voices, both musical and moral. Every graduate receives a medal with the boys' images and the words, "Courage comes in all sizes." The Vatican's investigation revealed similar crimes in parishes worldwide. Pope Francis mentioned the 3 boys by name in his 2024 Easter address. Tommy, David, and Ryan remind us that Christ's truth often comes from the mouths of babes. They died defending the poor, exposing the corrupt, protecting the innocent. They are martyrs of a different kind, martyrs for justice. Local schools created the Choir Boys Courage Award, given annually to students who stand up against wrongdoing. Winners receive scholarships funded by the seized criminal assets. The first recipient, in 2024, was a 12-year-old girl who exposed teacher misconduct. In her acceptance speech, she said, "Tommy, David, and Ryan showed us that kids can change the world. We just have to be brave enough to try." The last surviving conspirator, facing death in prison in 2024, finally showed remorse. Thomas Donovan's confession: "I hear them singing in my cell at night, 3 boys' voices, pure as angels, asking why. Why did we value money over their lives? Why did we choose evil? I have no answer except greed and cowardice. I pray they forgive me, but I know I don't deserve it. Margaret Foster's nephew, Marine Sergeant Paul Foster, who'd protected his aunt as she retrieved the evidence, reflected, "My aunt carried survivor's guilt for 38 years. But those boys chose her for a reason. They knew she'd eventually find the courage they had. It just took her longer. In the end, she was their voice from beyond the grave." The forensic reconstruction of the boys' final moments revealed heartbreaking details. They'd held hands as they died, forming a circle. Tommy had Ryan's inhaler in his pocket. The younger boy had asthma, and Tommy had grabbed it to help him. David had wrapped his choir, stole around Ryan's shoulders to keep him warm. Even facing death, they'd protected each other. On the first anniversary of the body's discovery, December 1st, 2024, Millbrook held a memorial service. The entire town attended, acknowledging their collective failure, promising to never again let fear silence justice. The mayor announced that December 15th would forever be Courage Day, in honor of 3 boys who had more bravery than an entire town of adults. The media coverage inspired similar investigations nationwide. The choir boys' effect led to the exposure of financial crimes in religious institutions across America. Dozens of cold cases were reopened. Missing children were found. Criminals who'd thought themselves safe after decades were brought to justice. But perhaps the most poignant tribute came from the 2024 St. Michael's Memorial Choir, made up of children from the same neighborhoods as Tommy, David, and Ryan. At their first performance, they sang an original composition titled "Three Voices Rising," with lyrics that moved audiences to tears. In the darkness of December, 3 lights shone so bright. Tommy, David, Ryan, guardians of right. They sang against the silence. They stood against the strong. Their voices live forever in justice's eternal song. The sheet music for this song is now distributed free to choirs worldwide, ensuring that the story of 3 brave boys is sung in perpetuity. As this investigation concludes, one truth emerges above all. Tommy Walsh, David Chen, and Ryan Martinez were more than victims. They were heroes who chose truth over safety, justice over silence, and courage over fear. They documented evil with the precision of trained investigators despite being children. They protected evidence with the wisdom of seasoned prosecutors despite being innocents. They faced death with more bravery than most adults could muster. Their story reminds us that corruption thrives in silence, that evil flourishes when good people stay quiet, and that sometimes the purest voices speaking truth are the youngest among us. 3 choir boys went to practice on a December evening in 1985. They never came home, but their song of justice rang out 38 years later, proving that truth, like their voices, can never truly be silenced. The final evidence in the case was discovered in 2024, hidden in the church bell tower, where Ryan had said to look. It was a photo the boys had taken of themselves on December 14th, using Tommy's camera's timer function. 3 boys in choir robes, arms around each other, smiling despite knowing the danger they faced. On the back, in David's handwriting, "We are not afraid. We have each other. We have the truth. That's enough." It was more than enough. It was everything. The investigation's expansion in 2024 revealed even darker truths. FBI Special Agent Diana Morrison, no relation to Father Morrison, uncovered a nationwide network that the Millbrook case was just one part of. Her team's findings were staggering. Between 1975 and 1995, at least 43 children from church choirs across 6 states had disappeared under similar circumstances. All had discovered financial crimes. All had been silenced. The 3 boys from St. Michael's weren't just local heroes. They were part of a pattern of young martyrs who died exposing corruption. The discovery came from Ryan's notebook. On page 47, In his meticulous handwriting was a list of names he'd found in church correspondence. Other missing choir kids: Michael Donetti, 1981, Paul Johnson, 1983, Marcus Johnson, 1983, Timothy Brown, 1979, Joseph Marino, 1977. Ryan had started connecting dots that investigators wouldn't see for another 38 years. An 11-year-old boy had begun uncovering a conspiracy that reached across state lines. This led to the exhumation of William Carver's other properties. Ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies at 17 sites. The first excavation on January 15, 2024, at what was now a medical office building, revealed 2 sets of remains. The Johnson brothers from St. Catherine's, still wearing their Sunday school pins. The second site, a parking garage in downtown Millbrook, contained Michael Donetti, the communion medal his mother had described still around his neck. Each discovery brought new families forward. Angela Donetti, now 79, had waited 43 years to bury her son properly. They told me Michael ran away because I was too strict. For decades I blamed myself. I went to therapy, thinking I'd driven my baby away. Those monsters let me live with that guilt while my boy lay in concrete beneath a shopping mall. The financial investigation expanded exponentially. Forensic accountants discovered that the stolen church funds had been invested in real estate across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. The network had grown from $3 million in 1985 to an empire worth $400 million by 2024. Blood money, built on the bones of children, had funded hospitals, schools, and ironically, several youth centers named after the very board members who'd ordered the murders. Margaret Foster's testimony continued to provide crucial details. She remembered other children who'd suddenly stopped coming to choir, families who'd abruptly moved away, priests who'd been transferred without explanation. Her photographic memory of 38 years of services became a roadmap to uncovering the conspiracy. She identified 17 other adults who'd known something was wrong but had been silenced through threats or bribes. Joseph Krajewski, former maintenance supervisor, came forward in March 2024, now 84, and seeking redemption, he confessed to helping in the cover-up, though he'd been told the boys had been in an accident. Carver told me there had been a tragedy at the church, and we needed to handle it quietly to protect the families from scandal. I was naive. I believed him. I helped transport evidence that night, not knowing the full truth. I've lived with that guilt for 38 years. Those boys deserved better from all of us adults. Krajewski's confession led to security footage from a traffic camera that had been archived but never reviewed. Enhanced with modern technology, it showed a construction truck leaving St. Michael's at 11:47 p.m. on December 15, 1985. The license plate, when traced, belonged to Carver Construction. The driver was clearly visible. Thomas Donovan, the man who'd claimed complete ignorance of the boy's fate. The psychological evaluation of the elderly conspirators revealed sociopathic tendencies masked by religious piety. Dr. Rebecca Chen, David's cousin, who became a psychiatrist inspired by his death, conducted the assessments. These men used faith as a weapon and shield simultaneously. They believed their financial success was God's blessing, and anyone who threatened it was doing Satan's work. In their twisted logic, killing children was protecting the church. The discovery of Father Morrison's complete journals in a hidden compartment in the rectory provided the missing pieces. The priest had documented everything from 1983 until his death in 2001. His December 16, 1985 entry was devastating. They made me tell them where the boys hid things. They made me watch as they destroyed most of the evidence. But I saved some. God forgive me. I saved what I could, and hid it. If you're reading this, check behind the statue of Saint Michael in the garden. The boys deserve justice. I was too cowardly to give them. Behind the statue, wrapped in plastic and oilcloth, investigators found a box containing the boys' original recordings, additional financial documents, and a heartbreaking item, a Christmas card Tommy had made for Father Morrison, never delivered. Inside, in crayon and glitter, it read, "Dear Father Morrison, we know you're sad sometimes. We want you to know that God loves you, and so do we. Merry Christmas from your favorite singers, Tommy, David, and Ryan." The priest had also hidden 3 cassette tapes. The boys had made of themselves practicing, not evidence, just 3 children singing Christmas carols, their voices pure and joyful. David's perfect pitch, leading them through silent night. Tommy's infectious laughter when Ryan hit a wrong note. Ryan's sweet solo of the Little Drummer Boy. These recordings became the most requested evidence in the trial, prosecutors playing them to remind the jury that these weren't just victims. They were children who loved music and life. The international attention the case received led to Vatican involvement. Cardinal Anthony Rossi was dispatched to investigate how such corruption had flourished in a Catholic institution. His findings, released in a 600-page report, revealed systemic failures at every level. The diocese had ignored warning signs, dismissed concerns, and prioritized reputation over child safety. The cardinal's conclusion was damning. The church failed these boys twice. First, by harboring the corruption they tried to expose, and second, by allowing their murders to go unpunished for nearly 4 decades. The report led to sweeping reforms in Catholic financial oversight globally. The Millbrook Protocols required all church financial records to be audited by external firms quarterly. Any discrepancies had to be reported to both church authorities and law enforcement. The 3 boys' sacrifice had changed how the entire Catholic Church handled money. On May 1, 2024, something extraordinary happened. Jenny Patterson Williams, the girl Tommy had planned to sing for, revealed she'd kept a secret for 38 years. The night before the boys disappeared, Tommy had given her a note during Mass, asking her to keep it safe and not read it until Christmas. She'd honored his request, opening it on Christmas Day 1985 to find a hand-drawn picture of himself singing and the words, "Jenny, this Christmas I'm singing just for you. I hope it makes you smile. Your friend forever, Tommy." She'd never shown anyone the note, considering it too precious, too private. But when the bodies were found, she knew it belonged with Tommy. At his reburial, she placed it in his casket, finally completing the Christmas gesture he'd planned. Her testimony at the trial was devastating. Tommy Walsh was 12 years old. He should have had a lifetime of Christmases, of songs, of chances to be brave. Instead, he had one moment of incredible courage that cost him everything. How do grown men murder children and live with themselves? The answer came from prison interviews with William Carver before his death. Completely unrepentant, he showed the full depth of his evil. They were going to destroy everything I'd built. 3 kids thought they could bring down an empire. They were wrong. I'd do it again. When asked if he felt any remorse, his answer chilled even hardened investigators. They sang at their own funeral. Every Sunday for 4 years they sang in that choir, never knowing they were practicing for their death service. This statement led to a review of all funeral services at St. Michael's from 1981 to 1985. Investigators discovered that other missing children had also sung at services shortly before their disappearances, almost as if they were being evaluated for how much they knew, how much threat they posed. The choir itself had been a hunting ground, with vulnerable, observant children identified and eliminated if they noticed too much. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a specialist in childhood trauma, who worked with the surviving choir members from 1985, revealed the lasting impact. Every child who sang with Tommy, David, and Ryan carries survivor's guilt. They wonder why they lived when their friends died. Many gave up music entirely, unable to bear the memories. The ripple effects of this crime touched hundreds of lives. One of those survivors, Anthony Marino, now 51 and a successful attorney, credits the three boys with his career choice. I was 11 in 1985, same age as Ryan. We were friends. When he disappeared, I knew something was wrong. The adults all lied to us, said they ran away. I became a lawyer to fight those kinds of lies. Every case I take, I think about Ryan's notebook, how he documented everything. He taught me that truth needs evidence, and evidence needs courage to present. The financial reparations ordered by the court were unprecedented. The $400 million empire built on the boys' deaths was liquidated. Every property, every investment, every asset was sold. The money was distributed to the victims' families and to establish the National Center for Missing Choir Children, headquartered in Millbrook. The center's database has helped solve cold cases dating back to the 1960s. The building that houses the center is the renovated St. Michael's Church. Where the altar once stood is now a memorial wall with photos of every child lost to this conspiracy. In the center, larger than the rest, are Tommy, David, and Ryan, their choir robes bright white, their faces forever young. Visitors often leave sheet music, a tradition that started spontaneously and continues daily. The organ that Margaret Foster played for 23 years, the one that hid evidence for 38 years, was restored by master craftsmen. Every pipe was examined, and in the process, they found something Margaret hadn't known about. David had hidden a letter inside one of the smaller pipes. Written to his parents in Mandarin, translated it read, "Mom and Dad, if something happens to me, know that I died trying to do right. You taught me to stand up for others. I stood up. I love you more than music itself." Elizabeth Chen, upon reading her son's hidden message, established the David Chen Courage in Music Foundation, providing free instruments and lessons to immigrant children. My son loved two things, music and justice. Now his memory helps other children find their voices, both musical and moral. Every child who plays a violin through our program carries David's spirit forward. The investigation techniques developed from studying how the three boys hid evidence has been incorporated into FBI training. The Henderson-Chen-Martinez protocol teaches agents to think like children when hiding crucial evidence. Places adults would overlook, but children would remember. This protocol has helped recover evidence in dozens of cases where victims had hidden proof before their deaths. Ryan's notebook, now in the National Archives, has been digitized and studied by investigative journalists worldwide. His methodology, matrice dating, multiple source verification, corroborating evidence matrice, was remarkably sophisticated for an 11-year-old. Columbia Journalism School created the Ryan Martinez Award for Young Investigative Reporters, recognizing that age doesn't determine capability in uncovering truth. The psychological profiles of the three boys, compiled from interviews with surviving friends and family, revealed remarkable complementary strengths. Tommy was the leader, charismatic enough to convince others to help. David was the strategist, planning their evidence-gathering operations. Ryan was the documenter, ensuring everything was recorded and hidden. Together they formed a perfect investigative team that many professional units would envy. The discovery of evidence in the church using modern forensic techniques revealed the boys' final path through the building. They'd moved from the choir room through the sanctuary to the vestry, apparently trying to secure the evidence they'd gathered. Analysis showed they'd been determined and brave, working together even when confronted by the conspirators. Their focus had been on preserving the truth they'd uncovered, successfully hiding recordings and documents that would eventually expose the entire criminal network. The medical examiner's final report, focused on what the boys had accomplished, rather than how they'd died. Despite facing danger, they'd managed to hide evidence in 17 different locations. They'd protected each other and thought of others even in their final moments. Tommy had been holding Ryan's asthma inhaler. David had wrapped his choir, stole around Ryan to comfort him. They were found positioned as they'd lived, as protectors and friends. Their courage in documenting crimes and hiding evidence had ultimately led to justice being served 38 years later. The community response to these revelations was profound. Millbrook established the December 15th Memorial Run, where participants run the route the boys should have walked home that night. Thousands participate annually, ending at the Memorial Park where they sing Carol of the Bells, the song the boys had been practicing for their final Christmas concert. Local schools revolutionized their approach to student concerns after the case. The Tommy, David, and Ryan protocol requires any report from a child about adult misconduct to be investigated by independent authorities, not school administrators. No child's concern is dismissed as imagination or troublemaking. The boys' deaths taught that children often see what adults choose to ignore. The musical legacy of the three boys lived on in unexpected ways. The Millbrook Boys Choir was re-established in 2024 with strict oversight and transparency. Their first concert featured 3 soloists chosen to honor each boy's memory: a red-headed jokester for Tommy, a precise perfectionist for David, and a small but powerful voice for Ryan. When they performed, 3 spotlights remained on empty chairs, acknowledging the voices that should have been there. The choir's signature piece became an original composition by Marcus Chen, David's younger cousin, who became a composer. 3 Voices Ascending premiered at Carnegie Hall in December 2024, with a 300-voice children's choir from around the world. The piece builds from a single voice to a triumphant chorus, representing how the boys' solitary stand had inspired a global movement. The standing ovation lasted 17 minutes. In the Vatican archives, the case of Tommy Walsh, David Chen, and Ryan Martinez was designated for potential beatification midas not as religious martyrs, but as defenders of the innocent, a new category created specifically for their case. The process would take years, but the possibility that 3 choir boys might become saints for their pursuit of justice captured global imagination. The ongoing investigation continued to yield results. In June 2024, a safety deposit box belonging to Thomas Donovan was discovered in a bank that was being demolished. Inside were photographs that sickened investigator, not just of the 3 boys' bodies, but of 6 other children, previously unknown victims from churches in Maryland and Virginia. Each photo was labeled with a date and amount, apparently the payment received for each murder. This discovery expanded the investigation interstate, with FBI offices in 12 states coordinating efforts. The choir boy conspiracy, as media dubbed it, was revealed to be one of the largest child murder conspiracies in American history. By August 2024, remains of 19 additional victims had been recovered, all killed between 1977 and 1989, all connected to church financial crimes. The 3 boys from St. Michael's had been the last victims. Their meticulous documentation and hidden evidence had apparently scared the conspirators into stopping the murders. Though the financial crimes continued, in a perverse way, their deaths had saved future children. The conspiracy was too afraid of leaving more evidence after seeing how thorough 3 children had been. Margaret Foster's health declined rapidly after giving her testimony, but she lived long enough to see justice served. Her final public statement, read at the sentencing hearing, was profound. For 38 years I heard those boys singing in my dreams. Beautiful, pure voices, asking why I didn't help them. Now I know they weren't asking for help. They were asking me to be their voice when they no longer could be. It took me too long, but I finally sang their truth to the world. She died peacefully on July 2nd, 2024, at 3:47 p.m. and exactly 38 years to the minute after she'd last seen the boys alive. Witnesses say she was humming Carol of the Bells as she passed. Her funeral at the Memorial Center was attended by thousands, with 3 young choir boys singing her favorite hymn. As they sang, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the 3 empty chairs that permanently stood on the stage. The economic impact on Millbrook was initially devastating. The town built on Carver construction money faced bankruptcy, but the Memorial Center, the yearly visitors, and the headquarters of the National Center for Missing Choir Children revitalized the economy. The town that had harbored evil for decades transformed into a beacon for child protection and justice. The psychological studies of the community continued for years. Dr. Sarah Williams published The Millbrook Syndrome: How Communities Enable Evil Through Silence, which became required reading in sociology programs. Her conclusion: 3 children showed more moral courage than hundreds of adults. They prove that knowing right from wrong isn't about age or experience. It's about choosing to act on that knowledge regardless of personal cost. The legal precedents set by the case were far-reaching. The choir boy laws passed in 2024 made it a federal crime to threaten or harm child whistleblowers. Religious institutions lost significant legal protections if they failed to report financial crimes. The statute of limitations for crimes involving child victims was eliminated entirely. 3 boys had changed American law from their graves. In December 2024, on the anniversary of their disappearance, something remarkable happened. 3 young boys, each 12, 13, and 11 years old, the same ages as Tommy, David, and Ryan, came forward in different states, with evidence of financial crimes in their own churches. They'd been inspired by the story, had documented everything like Ryan, had been brave like Tommy, had been precise like David. All 3 cases led to arrests and convictions. The ripple effect continued. By 2025, the choir boy method of investigation was being taught in journalism schools. Ryan's notebook had been published as a textbook example of investigative documentation. David's strategic planning was studied in criminal justice programs. Tommy's leadership in the face of danger was analyzed at military academies. The families found different ways to heal. The Walshes established a scholarship for aspiring singers from working-class families. Every recipient was told Tommy's story and asked to sing with the same courage he'd shown. The Chens created an exchange program between American and Taiwanese students, believing David would have wanted to bridge cultures through music. The Martinez family opened Ryan's Place, a community center where children could safely report concerns about adults. Patrick Walsh, Tommy's father, despite his advanced age, became an advocate for missing children. He traveled the country speaking to parent groups. I spent 38 years wondering if I'd failed my boy, if he'd run away because of something I'd done. The truth was worse, but also better. My son died a hero, trying to protect others. Every parent here, hug your children, but also listen to them. If they tell you something's wrong, believe them. The final piece of evidence discovered was perhaps the most poignant. In August 2024, during renovations of the Chen family restaurant, workers found a loose floorboard in what had been David's room. Beneath it was a time capsule David had created just days before his death. Inside were 3 items: a photo of the 3 boys at choir practice, a recording of them singing together, and a note: "We know something bad might happen. If it does, please remember us not as victims but as friends who tried to do the right thing. We're not afraid because we're together." The recording was of them practicing not Carol of the Bells but Lean on Me, with Tommy singing lead. David harmonizing, and Ryan keeping rhythm. They dissolved into laughter at the end, when Ryan accidentally sang the wrong verse. It was the sound of childhood, of innocence, of friendship that evil couldn't break. This recording became the most played piece of evidence, reminding everyone that three heroes were also just three kids who loved to sing together. As 2024 drew to a close, Millbrook held its first Festival of Light on December 15th, transforming the anniversary of darkness into a celebration of courage. 3,000 candles were lit, one for each day the boys had been missing over 38 years. Children's choirs from around the world performed virtually, their voices joining in a global concert that lasted exactly 47 minutes, the time between when the boys were last seen alive and when they died. The festival ended with a moment that no one who witnessed it would forget. As the final candle was lit, three birds, a cardinal, a blue jay, and a dove, mined on the three empty chairs on stage. They stayed for exactly the length of Carol of the Bells, then flew away together into the night sky. Skeptics called it coincidence. Believers called it a sign. Parents called it a reminder that innocence once lost sometimes finds a way to return. The case officially closed on December 31st, 2024, with all perpetrators either convicted or deceased, but the impact continued to ripple outward. Films were made, books were written, songs were composed, but more importantly, children were protected, crimes were exposed, and justice was served because three choir boys had refused to let evil win. The last word belongs to Ryan Martinez's mother, Maria, now 75, and still visiting her son's grave every Sunday. My baby was 11 years old. 11, he should have been worried about homework and baseball, not documenting crimes and hiding evidence. But when he saw wrong, he acted. When he saw evil, he stood up. He was just a little boy who loved to sing, but he became a giant who brought down monsters. That's my son. That's my hero. That's my Ryan. In the end, Tommy Walsh, David Chen, and Ryan Martinez achieved immortality, not through their deaths, but through their courage. Three voices that were silenced in 1985 now echo through every child who speaks truth, every whistleblower who documents crime, every person who chooses justice over safety. They went to choir practice on a December evening as boys. They entered history as heroes. Their song never truly ended. It just found millions of new voices to carry it forward. The inscription on their memorial, chosen by the families together, reads, "Well, I, three boys who sang with the angels, fought with the courage of lions, and died with the grace of saints. Their voices were silenced, but their truth rings eternal. Tommy Walsh, David Chen, Ryan Martinez, forever young, forever brave, forever remembered." And they are. Every December 15th at 7:47 p.m., church bells across America ring 47 times. Once for each minute, the boys fought for justice. Once for each minute, they stood together. Once for each minute, they proved that evil may win battles, but good wins the war. The bells ring, and somewhere, in the echo between bronze and sky, three young voices can still be heard, singing their eternal song of truth, justice, and courage. The choir boys of St. Michael's never got to sing their Christmas concert, but their story became a song the whole world learned by heart.